Hey everyone, it's ENDYMION, and I've officially been playing Dragon Age the Veilguard as of the making of this video for about 11 hours straight. I really want to get this game done as soon as I can. I'm currently on part 6 of the main campaign, which based on what I'm reading, there's 11 or 12 parts to this game. Nothing substantial has happened besides the first opening 20 minutes, and no, I'm not kidding. So I figured I'd tell you what I've played so far and what the game is actually like, and then we'll move on to news like players already leaving the game behind, political activists ruining language in the name of wokeness, ideology being pushed, and deceptive journalist types being exposed. So to start, I played the game. The first 20 minutes, which you've seen in previews, is easily the most exciting part of the game, because you're actually chasing after Solas, who is the sole reason why this game is hyped up for Dragon Age fans in the first place. Players know who Solas is, yet instead what ends up happening is you break a statue during his ritual, which you've seen in previews as well. Solas then tries to push it back, the ritual goes haywire, and Solas gets trapped in the Fade, and instead now 2 old elf gods get released to wreak havoc on the world. At this point, for the full 11 hours that I've played, Solas is completely sidelined and has no agency in the story whatsoever. I wish I was kidding, but besides I think 2 or 3 conversations that I've had with Solas in the Fade, which you're able to do simply because your blood hit the pavement during the ritual site, yeah, really dumb explanation, but okay anyways. You can talk to Solas at certain points, but beyond that, no, I'm not kidding you, Solas is officially beaten. You beat the entire point of this game's existence within the first 20 minutes of playing it. What's left afterwards is this very weird, disjointed adventure where you go around recruiting party members and just doing quests in various locations over and over again. Nothing about this game feels dire besides one single moment in the game where you visit a village and find it completely ruined by the Blight, which was caused by one of the Elven gods. As Skillup said in his own review, the game never reaches that level of darkness ever again. And based on what I've played so far, he's right, it really hasn't. The best way I can explain to you how Veilguard's story feels is like, imagine you were going to the theater to watch Avengers Infinity War, and they have been hyping up Thanos for years, dude. You're excited, you want to see Thanos in all of his glory. But then he ends up getting beaten in the first 20 minutes of the movie, and then is just relegated to sit in a cell for the rest of the movie. And instead now the main villains are the children of Thanos, like that Ebony Maw guy, he is now the main villain basically going forward. That's Veilguard. The entire story and pacing, it feels like a mistake on BioWare's part from the get-go. Especially considering that in this game you play as Rook, who is literally just some guy that Varric picked up during a job prior to the game's events. Apparently Rook and Varric have been chasing Solas for about a year until you get to play the game in the beginning. Rook is the main character simply because you are considered a wild card, so to speak. Someone that Solas doesn't know, therefore he can't anticipate what you're going to do against him, even though he admits when you meet him in the game that he knew you were chasing him this entire time, and he found out everything about you anyways. Again, Solas is the Thanos to the Inquisitor from Inquisition's Iron Man, so to speak. But imagine instead of Iron Man fighting Thanos in Infinity War or Endgame, it's like you're playing Drax or Star-Lord instead. That's who you're playing here in terms of importance to the story and these characters. That may actually be giving the game too much credit. You're more like Mantis or Wong from Doctor Strange, I guess, in terms of who Thanos would even know, or Solas in this instance. Honestly, the entire game should have just been you as the Inquisitor again. It would immediately make everything that's going on 10 times better. The fact that it's not the Inquisitor chasing Solas, and they didn't make Solas the main true villain here, it is such a missed opportunity. It's honestly more pathetic than it is disappointing. Rook just doesn't make any sense. And then the Elven gods, I couldn't really tell you because besides one cutscene where each god says one line of dialogue while looking through some magical portal as they stare at the party, I have never even seen them once since then. I've also noticed that every single villain in every mission that I've done pretty much unanimously has always been white men as well. Anytime someone is shown to be the villain of a mission or side mission, you can pretty much bet your sweet butt cheeks that it's going to be an incompetent white guy, while a bunch of diverse people just kind of stand around yelling at the white person for being a bad guy once they're caught. Like that blighted village I talked about earlier, they got sold out by their mayor because the elven gods promised that mayor golden return. And yeah, he's a white guy, big surprise, and everyone on your team wants you to leave this guy to die. And I'm trying my damnness to play Veilguard like a renegade in Mass Effect, so I told my companions to just shut up, and then I just saved the guy because I wanted to. There was also another mission, which was apparently a main mission, which I couldn't tell because it looked like every other mission in the game. But anyway, you're in Mithrathis with Nev, Gallus, and you're chasing down a Venatori mage who's just doing, typical evil things. And the mission ends up being that a skinny, pathetic, you guessed it, white boy was the villain all along, and then he gets away with it because his dad is rich. And even the captain of the guard who's protecting that rich white boy is also a white guy too, who later on you also find dirt on, proving that, you guessed it again, is corrupt and evil, and is also working with the Venatori because they're all white guys. There's even a faction quest in Antiva where you have to infiltrate this Kunari stronghold, which is actually a pretty decent mission with a pretty cool boss at the end, to be honest. But once you get back to the Crows' base, the governor there says the Crows need to not get involved, although they'll just cause more damage. And he is also, you guessed it, a white guy, as diverse people just stare at him angrily, as you see on screen here, and then tell him to know his place until he leaves. It's so blatantly obvious that it's more pathetic than anything else. This game, just so far, it just hates white men completely. Which makes it all the more funny considering that my Rook is a white guy that's saving all of them too. I think I've heard mention of one female villain for the character Lucanus, and I think their name was Zara, if I remember hearing it correctly, but I haven't met her yet. But besides that one character, all the other side bad guys are men, and they all seem to either be white men or faceless, forgettable Kunari that you just kill and then forget about. If you couldn't already tell, the agenda here is very clear. For the first few hours too, the only companions available to you are pretty much all women as well. It's not until you get Lucanus you get an actual male teammate, but he's more effeminate too, to be honest. I feel like I'm in a game with negative masculine presence, if that makes any sense. Going from playing Space Marine 2 to Veilguard is like eating a 10-ounce steak with fries and a nice drink to a vegan burger with a latte. It's the only way that I can explain it to you. In terms of exploration, it kind of varies and depends. The best location, in my opinion so far, is the Crossroads, because it's this sprawling landmass within the Fade, the realm of dreams and magic. And it splinters, and it has actual exploration that's akin to Inquisition, with missions and secrets to find and puzzles to solve for items and whatever else. I actually like this area. I just wish the whole game was like the Crossroads, but it isn't. But I will say credit where it's due. I do find the Minrathis and Treviso city maps to have quite a bit to discover too, especially Treviso. Lots of places to find stuff, run around, climb on. I genuinely like how they designed Treviso, especially here. But everything else outside of what I just mentioned, it's very linear and painfully generic. It's just a weird game. There's parts where I go, oh, I kind of like that. But for every oh, I get like 4, man, what the hell moments in return. I don't like that you can't control your teammates. Their abilities are also just very simple, and so are their skill trees. Your companions also can't die in combat because they have no health bars, which is also weird. So whenever they actually get some equipment, it's just to buff their damage or their cooldowns pretty much. As for Rook, you get a decent amount of customization, so credit where it is due at least, but I do appreciate that the skill tree at least allows the warrior class anyway, which is what I'm playing, to do some sort of cool stuff. I don't have a specialization yet on level 15. I believe as of my last play session, they unlock at level 20. But I'm thinking that I will probably go Reaper because you get to kill stuff with a Ghost Death Scythe, and then you steal HP when you attack. And it's also shield based, so it's kind of like a Dark Knight in Final Fantasy, I guess. Oh yeah, and every class like Warrior, Mage, and Rogue, they have 2 weapon types that you can switch between. I like this idea as well. I think it's good. So like I said, I'm being fair with the game. I'm giving it kudos where I genuinely feel that it's rewarded. The combat is not as bad as some reviews made it out to be, but yes, it is very button mashy and repetitive. But I don't hate the combat. At least as a warrior, it's somewhat fun at times to parry enemies and Captain America throw my shield into them, I guess, but does the combat evolve in any meaningful way? No. Then you have the companions, which are a mixed bag so far for me, and I don't really feel connected to any of them. Nev is basically Yennefer from The Witcher, but not nearly as cool. Balara, I am going to guess, will probably win Performance of the Year at the Game Awards, because she's all bubbly and happy and her design is very diverse. Her actual character, though, it's fine at best. Lucanus is honestly also kind of forgettable too, and he looks all edgy, but deep down, he just feels like he's being restricted by the HR writing that is engulfing this game. And then, of course, you have Harding from Inquisition. She's fine, but nothing special, and that's all I have for teammate-wise anyway so far. But I'm not really attached to anybody in any way like I was to, say, Cassandra in Inquisition, or Morrigan in Origins, and then some. The game, to me, it just feels like the most in comparison to Dragon Age 2, to other games in the series, I guess. And I mean in the sense that Dragon Age 2 felt very disjointed and paced very weirdly, and yeah, that's how Veilguard feels like to a T. Inquisition, that game actually felt like it knew what it wanted to be, and it honed in on its strengths. It had weaknesses, but you know, credit where it's due. But Veilguard feels like it was clearly intended to be something else, but then got transformed midway through development into what it is now. I mean, Rook alone being this kind of archetype bandit-like character, yeah, they obviously reused this from when this game was a multiplayer game. Also, I don't hate the art style as much as other people, I guess, when I play the game. However, I do find that the monster designs in this game, they are dog water. There is no way of going around it or defending it. You can't. Character-wise, it varies. I'm fine with some of them. Some of them kind of like, you look really weird and gross. Although I hope if Dragon Age ever does get another game, that they make it more like Inquisition, but they can keep a little bit of that animated style, and then it shouldn't be too bad. But like I said, the enemies, on the other hand, yeah, no. I mean, especially the monsters. Like the Darkspawn, they look horrendous. They stick out looking like Fortnite clone enemies. I don't know, man. This whole game is so jarring for a longtime fan of the series, as you can see. Every time I feel myself slightly getting sucked into the world, I get pulled out because the game evidently hates white men exclusively, and has mostly women only in positions of power pretty much. Even when a guy is in a position of power, he has to share it with a woman, like the Crows for example. All the companions so far, they feel forgettable. Combat is a seesaw of, this is a little bit fun at times, but it's also very mindless, and I just wish that this was more like Origins or Inquisition, to be honest with you. The world is a mixed bag. The pacing is awful. The game is not nearly dark enough either. And it completely wastes its potential with Solus, and instead gives you two Corypheus-like villains that are basically mustache-twirling parodies of themselves. If I had to rate the game, I would give it like a 5, maybe a 6, but when things are better, like very rarely, I would like start going a little bit to a 7, but unfortunately every time stupid stuff happens, which is pretty often, it just falls back to like a 5 again for me. This is not the best Dragon Age, not even close so far, but I think if you really want to play it, I would honestly wait for a deep sale at least. Just know that the game is a woke activist dream, so let's get into the news now that my impressions here are done for now. Firstly, the game debuted at around 70,000 players on Steam. It then dropped around 55,000 that same night, which is not a good sign, although it has picked up again to around 68,000 again as of the making of this video. I don't know if Veilguard will bomb per se, maybe, but we don't know. It's still too early to tell, especially considering outside of Steam, we don't have concrete numbers on like PlayStation and Xbox. But based on what I was told, the overall pre-order numbers for this game were definitely less than 1 million, in case you want to know. Inquisition, in case you don't know, is BioWare's best-selling game, and I don't think Veilguard will reach that personally. But some websites are just downright lying about this, like PC Games N, for example, has come out with this article stating that Veilguard beat Inquisition Steam player counts by 500% in 1 hour of release. Which of course people will use this as a gotcha saying, look chuds, you lost, this game is doing well. But this is deceptive writing and doesn't paint the correct picture at all. Did Veilguard beat Inquisition on Steam? Well, yes, but actually no. Let me explain. You see, Inquisition came out in 2014. However, the game, for whatever reason, wasn't available on Steam as a platform until 2020. So by the time Inquisition came to Steam, the core audience that had played this game either on PlayStation, Xbox, or the EA launcher on PC, a lot of them have already moved on from the game at that point. So when the game came to Steam 6 whole years after release, then yeah, of course the numbers weren't exactly too high. So yes, Veilguard did beat Inquisition by 500%, but you're comparing a game that was 6 years removed from its hype cycle to a game that released day one on Steam. That's not a very genuine comparison. I think we can all agree on that. But had Inquisition dropped day one on Steam, like back in 2014 alongside the PS4 and such, I guarantee you the Steam player count for Inquisition, that would have been well over 100,000, maybe even 200, 300,000 day one easily, no contest. But it's such an unfair and disingenuous comparison, and I mean, these are games journalists, so what do we really expect? Maybe they should report how Stardew Valley also beat Veilguard's player numbers during its day one release, and that Stardew Valley is an 8-year-old game at this point. Maybe write an article about that, PC Games N. Oh right, you won't, because it goes against your narrative. The freaking banana game has like 4 or 5 times the player count of Veilguard at release 2. A banana is beating Dragon Age, for God's sakes. This is why it's always important to read between the lines, because man, do people enjoy lying like this. The entire narrative surrounding Veilguard is just very obviously manufactured on purpose. For example, you can't even comment in the Steam forums on the game if you gave the game a negative review or have any opinion that goes against the forum's ideology. It's not okay at all. It effectively means that Steam's Dragon Age moderators are strong-arming their community into giving the game positive reviews in order to gain access to the forums. This is exactly how BioWare itself is being operated, as I reported on in my previous video. They are only rewarding good behavior and compliance on those who agree with the agenda and accept it. But going against it in any way will result in you being quite literally banned in response. This is not the actions of a gamer company that are operating in good faith at all. You should be open to criticism and allowing people to express their opinions, but by doing this, you're clearly confirming that you only want yes men to be able to speak. This is a sickness that has been permeating all throughout modern gaming for years now, and I make these videos because one day I want people to be able to speak their minds however they want within these game studios and forums and such without getting banned or fired. But it's pathetic to see BioWare going down this route in every way. It really saddens me greatly. Not only are they delivering what is objectively not the game that players have been waiting a decade for, but they're also banishing and attacking people for wrong things. Like, come on, dude. Shame on everyone who does this, by the way. You're pathetic. One user named Bandar Hub went ahead and compiled a bunch of reviews showing how every single near perfect or perfect score given to the game was issued by someone who benefits or aligns with the political agenda that BioWare is pushing. Don't harass anyone in this, by the way. Let's just look at things. Firstly is Luke Mitchell of Checkpoint Gaming. One of the perfect scores given to Dragon Age. Of course, he identifies as an ally of the LGBTQ+, and said things like, "The impact that Dragon Age Inquisition had on the video games industry is still being felt to this day, particularly for anybody in the queer community. In 2014, BioWare created what many consider at a time a high point. A special shout out needs to happen here, as Dragon Age has once again done an excellent job when it comes to inclusivity and diversity, sexuality, and gender." Again, I won't go too much details as many of this stuff is truly stellar and best left unsaid, but as a simple example, playing as a male identifying protagonist, I was able to flirt with whomever I wanted. I didn't always go to plan, but I had options across the board if I wanted to be gay AF. Meticulously making their interpretations of the perfect fantastical hero, then some early narrative beats went even deeper and more personal, allowing queer gamers to really play as themselves or who they see themselves as. That's all I'll say, but I can't wait to see the LGBTQIA+, my god, community discover these well-implemented, thoughtful additions. Dragon Age Inquisition has for a long time been repeatedly mentioned as a key moment in gaming history when it comes to representation, and the Veilguard is set to be another milestone. Again, that was a perfect score for that one, and they also identify as you think they do, but let's keep going. Then you have Gaming Bible, which had another reviewer here named M, who gave the game a perfect score as well, claiming things like, "I especially enjoyed being able to make my character overweight. As someone who's mid-sized, it's validating to be able to create a character that reflects that aspect of myself. Not everyone will want to, but it's liberating to have the option, as too is being able to have top surgery scars or to depict a woman with facial hair." These are details that help us resonate with Rook on a deeper level, truly allowing for the immersion RPGs are so famed for. Some will call it woke, but they're merely parroting a word without understanding its origins. All 7 of the Veilguard's companions can be wooed regardless of your gender or race, described as enforced pansexuality by some fans, but I don't see such romantic freedoms that way. Of course you don't. Should you not believe Lucanus or Nev would romance a woman, you shouldn't romance them as one. Removing rigidity doesn't stop you from applying your own boundaries, it just ensures there's more flexibility in how everyone can play. The biggest obstacle to there were so many aspects I could alter, from facial structure to the scars on Rook's body. Being able to mold your character isn't a new feature from BioWare, but the extent of the variety is. The only part of Rook you can't change is their genitals, which thank God for that. Although BioWare allows you to fine-tune your character, you won't find quite the selection of options that we've been afforded in other experiences. In all honesty, I don't think you're going to miss it, save or losing out on the novelty factor. This person clearly gave the game a perfect score because of the identity stuff. It's so obvious that it's painful. How a game that fumbles its entire story point in the first 20 minutes and has terrible pacing manages a perfect score? can only be surmised by someone who is doing this for agenda's sake only. But the fact representation was not enough for Gaming Bible, but more was required for a perfect score, that kinda tells you everything that you need to know here. There's also Eurogamer, another perfect score that skips right around everything but lands on its inclusive, therefore 10 out of 10. Also, the Eurogamer reviewer admitted in their review that they ended up with Tosh, the non-binary Kunari, as their romantic companion. Which is not the flex you think it is, but alright then. Again, there's so many of these reviews too. I could read you all of them, but I won't. And they all gave the game high scores not because of gameplay or story, but simply because they all pandered to what these people wanted in the game. Why this is concerning is because we have now seen 2 years in a row where games are being rewarded high scores due to the push of inclusivity. Baldur's Gate 3 was one of those games, but it smartly dances around the inclusivity by making it a choice and not being forced on the player. However, in Veilguard's case, that is not the same at all. You're beaten over the head with this stuff at times, and it's sad to see. Forbes actually had an article recently titled "Dragon Age the Veilguard's clumsy, preachy political messaging does more harm than good." Again, this journalist here, Eric Kane, who tends to have more level-headed takes than, say, Paul Tassi over there, is a good example of this. Eric explains in his article that the Veilguard isn't even a bad game, it's even fun at times and there's moments of genuine joy to be had, but that it's all undermined and wasted by the developer's constant need for the pandering and politics to take center stage. Here's some of what Eric said via his article, and I quote, "The best way to convince someone of your own point of view is generally not to bash them over the head with a cudgel, though that seems to be the preferred approach in modern political discourse and alas in entertainment. The culture being what it is has lost all sense of subtlety. In far too many films, TV shows, and video games, we see a heavy-handed top-down approach to the issues of today. It's a real shame that the developers at BioWare decided to go this route in Dragon Age the Veilguard. It will undoubtedly turn many gamers off entirely, not necessarily because they're unsympathetic to trans rights, but because they're tired of being preached at. In one of the scenes in question, one character misgenders another. To atone for this sin, she does a set of push-ups and then lectures the other characters on how to properly apologize. The term non-binary is thrown around, despite this being a word that very few people had even heard of when Dragon Age Inquisition came out a decade ago, let alone in a fantasy setting divorced entirely from the real world. This is immersion breaking. Frankly, it's written so poorly that it comes across as self-parody. The character's performative apology is shallow and empty, as all performative apologies are. In my experience, a simple and genuine sorry is better than making a big show of it and then bragging about how much better your apology is." End quote. Eric's right. These days, all it takes is one fumble to really set the entire ship completely off course, and that's what BioWare has done here. The scene that they're talking about, I can't really share it online because BioWare, for whatever reason, finds it as grounds to strike your video down, which is pathetic, by the way, since the scene is literally in the game, but you can definitely find it on Twitter and such. It's the one with Isabella from Dragon Age 2 having a monologue about diversity and pronouns alongside Tosh, the non-binary Kunari companion. And Eric's right, it all feels immersion breaking, and that's the point. These sorts of things do not belong within these games because Dragon Age is not and should not be representative of the real world. But it is instead. Before, elves were mostly fair-skinned people in previous games, yet in Veilguard, you'll run into Asian and black elves too, even though they pretty much never existed in previous games until right now all of a sudden. This constant need for the real world to exist within the fantasy is why people are pushing back so hard. Because this stuff has no place in these games. Look, identifying yourself as a woman while being a man in a game is one thing, because again, that's not the player's choice in the beginning of the game. But like I said previously, the reason why Baldur's Gate 3 was as successful as it was, and still is by the way, since Steam's numbers alone, PG-3 is in the same ballpark as Veilguard a full year after release, is because they left this sort of pandering to you as the player to decide how much of it or how little you wanted to see in the game. I would have had no problem with Tosh being non-binary if there was a choice that the player could use to convince Tosh that being non-binary is nonsense. This way, as any good player choice game would, it would allow the player to decide what Tosh ultimately sees herself as in their playthrough. So if you want to double down with her delusion and support it, you can, but if you don't want to support it, you don't have to. Unfortunately, in Veilguard, there is very little options to actually be who you want to be in this game when it actually comes to your choices. Sure, you can have top surgery scars or put a beard on a woman or be whatever the hell Heelvsbabyface made his Rook into, which you're seeing on screen here, because my god, what a specimen that is to look at. But the problem here is that for a game that supposedly allows you to have choices in what happens, the actual choices don't seem to matter at all because you can barely even be mean, let alone decide how people see themselves. True inclusivity would have been to give the player the ability to tell Tash, hey, you're a woman, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being born a woman or a man, but you don't need to go down this route of claiming you're neither because you're confused. Allowing Tash to reach a point where she eventually comes to terms with herself and accepts who she is, that would be true player choice from a gameplay perspective. Because hey, we're playing a video game here, not watching a movie or TV show. However, if this choice was available, we all know that those same review scores and their writers that I showed before would instead dock the game points simply because they don't feel like their lifestyle choices are now being seen or respected the way they want it to be in the game to a T. And this is the problem here, that BioWare has instead decided to pander to games journalists who don't buy their games, because you gave them codes for free instead of the millions of eager players out here who actually would support you if you didn't treat them like afterthoughts in the discussion. You can't say your game is player choice if you can't decide things like helping a companion come to terms with what is objectively a core issue in their character arc. In Baldur's Gate 3, for example, you can kill any of your companions. You can have them die by a trap or like a battle, and then you can just like leave their body there and just move on with the game. That's real player choice, my friends. You can have moments where Lae'zel and Shadowheart are at each other's throats, and then you can decide and help them come to terms that they need to accept each other's opinions for the sake of the team, or you can gaslight one or the other into killing the other one. Again, that's true player choice. But when Tosh tells you that she's non-binary, and you have no way of telling Tosh that she's wrong, or to come to terms with herself, or to tell her to leave your party, or whatever, that is not player choice. That is the developers forcing something down your throat. And this extends to Veilguard's dialogue. Like I said, I've played this game now, so I know you cannot be mean to anyone. The best you can do is be snarky at best, but gone are the days of pushing people out of windows in Mass Effect 2, or getting bribed and shooting a certain Solarian when they're trying to cure something, or, I don't know, teaming up with Logain who didn't answer the call for the Grey Wardens. What is the point of your player choice game if the player's choices do not matter at all besides who they can sleep with? In Baldur's Gate 3, if you want, you can become completely evil and literally end the world. Is it breaking canon? Absolutely. But it's a video game where you can have different endings and decide based on your choices what happens. Veilguard is more like an HR training course that has been wrapped up in an okay at best action-adventure game. That's seriously all it is. I'll beat the game so that I can speak on the rest of it, but as of right now, no. This game was not worth the money that I spent on it. And what annoys me the most is that because Veilguard was given objectively high reviews because of agenda pushing, that this will, in the future, cause other games to be made that wouldn't have implemented such things to now reconsider implementing those very ideas into their games now. Not because it will enrich or better the player experience, oh no dear viewer, but simply because maybe if we put trans surgery scars or non-binary forced talking points into our game, our Metacritic score will go higher than it maybe could have if we pander to these reviewers instead. The Game Awards already almost unanimously only recognizes games that pander in some way already. Hogwarts Legacy got ignored last year because of J.K. Rowling, and I firmly expect Black Myth Wukong and Stellar Blade to be ignored come this year's awards too. I would be genuinely surprised if they got nominated for anything at all. But you can't tell me there's no agenda pushing here when the players aren't supporting this in a similar fashion to Inquisition. Everyone who didn't get an early review code is telling you that it's a 6 or a 5 out of 10 game at best. That the pandering is not rejectable based on player choice in a franchise that markets itself on the concept to begin with. And you can't tell me none of this is coincidence considering this keeps on happening time and again like this. Like one user came out to expose that the German language in Veilguard is completely disrespected and butchered in order to make way for Californian dialect instead. I'll read you this. It's from the Steam forums and a user named MFBigKid who said, "If you thought the English version was bad, look at what they did to the German version of this game. So the English version uses inclusive language like they, them, right? Well, that's nothing compared to what they did to the German localized version of the game." In this forum post, the project manager for all localization brags about how he and his team applied fully gendered German language to the game, both in written and spoken text. What this means, let me explain. There is no singular they in German. So what the German localization team did was to use so-called neo-pronouns, pronouns that didn't really exist until trans activists made them up. So now the game is full of neo-pronouns, hen, hem, and at the end of nouns there is an E attached. Imagine in English there's a guard, then with German gendering it'll be guard-e or guard-a. And if that wasn't enough, they're also using stuff like the gender star and the double point. Here's an example if these were applied in English. Hen is a capable fighter, but the leader star S of the troop is not a reasonable person, I don't know how to say that. My bad. No option to turn this off. $100 million project self-sabotage by political activism. Reminder, the vast majority of German citizens are against this sort of language. There was zero need for it, but EA let it happen anyway. As a German, the worst part of this is that I have no hopes for Mass Effect 5 now. As you can tell, I struggle to pronounce those examples because, to be real with you, I have no idea how I'm supposed to say Leader Star S. Is it Leader Liz? Leader S? I have no idea, man. But it's clear that none of this existed until mere years ago. But it proves the point that I'm making here. They're putting modern day nonsense in a game that doesn't even know what the internet is or anything else. So every time you inject your current day into games that are very clearly not current day, it leads to a bad time. I haven't met Tash yet in the game, but I'm keen to see if I can at least argue with her or they or whatever about their binariness. But so far, this is not the game that Dragon Age fans are looking for. I waited 10 years to beat Solus and ended up doing it in 20 minutes. And now I'm running errands with an Indian woman who has a peg leg and an Asian elf girl who is a living embodiment of the sound uwu. You should have been able to play the Inquisitor in this game, and by the way, I can't even make my Inquisitor in this game faithfully either. Here's my Inquisitor from Inquisition, and here's my Inquisitor in Veilguard. They look nothing alike, I know, because it's impossible to recreate what I had back then. There isn't even a base body option for male Inquisitor that is a white guy. It's either black or Asian guy only, so my Inquisitor is now slightly Asian because Veilguard won't let me make him a white guy. And the game also auto-selects female Inquisitor when you get the prompt, which means BioWare obviously believes that the female counterparts are always the canon versions. It's also tiring, man. This game could have been amazing. They could have made a dark fantasy true return to form to what Origins was and make us chase Solus across Thetis as he attempts to tear open the veil and usher in the Dreadwolf's reign. But instead, BioWare was obviously too afraid to upset Solus shippers and went the "oh, he's not that bad of a bad guy" trope instead. Now he's sitting in detention for the rest of the game, while you go fight two objectively far less interesting villains instead. I would say this game is a disappointment, but it would be a disappointment to disappointments. This is so far a massive waste of potential on BioWare's part, and I think in a year's time, many players will look back on Veilguard for the waste of potential that it is. But hey, at least you got to use pronouns, I guess. Thank you for watching, subscribe, thanks to my supporters. I'll have more videos on this because so much is unfolding, and I'll see you soon.